Welcome to the Pixel Opinions Roundtable First Opinions on Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins Trial Edition. That's a lot of words. I think that I got the name.
Nailed it.
For the record, I will never call it Stranger of Paradise again. It is now Final Fantasy Origin because that is a stupid name.
Agreed.
So anyway, E3 has passed.
Yep.
We can say it's very disappointing, but one of the few things that came out of it was the game that we were all excited for, was a Souls-like Final Fantasy. Lucky that they released a demo immediately. So we're going to do another one of our roundtables like Swords of Legends. We're going to play some random footage, but we're going to talk about our thoughts on it. Either of you want to start anywhere?
Go ahead, Alex.
Definitely not what I was expecting. I can say that much. Like when you first heard, or when I first heard, Final Fantasy Souls-like game, I kind of had something in my mind, and I was like, this is going to be the most amazing game ever. And maybe I hyped myself up way too much, because it did not live up to the hype whatsoever.
I will be honest. When they said Final Fantasy Souls-like game, and then I played this, I thought they were talking about two different games.
Yeah.
I didn't quite
that.
catch. Okay, we'll talk about it. I can see a couple of things, some parallels, but there's definitely a lot of separation there.
It feels closer to Neo.
Yes.
Than than Souls.
Sure. So I think, I guess, I don't know if there's a place we want to really start. Why
don't we start with graphics? That's very surface level.
Sure.
It's very immediate, and then we can branch out from there. They were a lot grainier and not very impressive than I expected.
They were kind of dark. There were some lighting issues that made a lot of things inside the castle very difficult to see.
Yeah.
Which would be fine if this was a semi-horror game, or if this was kind of because there are really dark spots in Dark Souls as well.
Yeah.
But this is not really a game where things are going to jump out at you. There's not really a purpose to having such dark spots.
And such a contradiction from the tutorial that is overly bright in the wheat field and so shimmery.
Yeah, it was a little bit different than what I was expecting. I don't know why they decided to do the tutorial that way. It's such a separation, right? It's just you're going from this super bright, airy outdoors to almost this dark, castle Gothic style, right?
I just think they went over the top with the particle effects or the shimmer or whatever you want to call it with that wheat field, because it was distracting. It was I don't have issues with it, but I could see maybe somebody who has a sensitivity to that kind of thing might have an issue with it.
I think the thing that bothered me the most with the tutorial was actually the fact that those little orbs that you had to pick up to progress the story or progress the tutorial, right, were so hard to see on the same color field. It was orange on yellow, and it was just, I was what am I clicking on?
I almost would have preferred it one of those old Metal Gear VR, not VR, the VR missions, where it was just an empty grid room.
Yeah. I didn't mind the tutorial. I thought the tutorial was a good way to show you the combat and stuff
but that. You don't need to do graphics or settings for that. You could literally have it be in an empty room and just do a tutorial and then move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also don't think that it was one of the more spectacular Final Fantasy settings.
Sure.
I think it was kind of bland. I want to say that there's been a lot of Final Fantasies, I'd say maybe as far back as the PS2 even, that have captured sort of a colorful, memorable locale with their graphics. Far better than this one. This one kind of felt a little...
Are you referring to the castle right now?
Yes, a little repetitive. A little... I don't know. There was no area in the castle that really stood out to me.
I think the only thing that even slightly stood out was really the difference once you got into almost the palace, the tower top, right?
Yeah.
And then you ended up going to the boss room, right? Because that's kind of the culmination of the tutorial.
Okay.
Or this trial.
Okay. Aside from the boss room, though, can you describe any room of the castle?
It's a dark castle.
Yeah, I mean, there's
that's
dark
the thing.
corridors and okay, some broken down metal. Yeah, it's really...
But we
it's
clearly
very,
just got a slice of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to matter how they diversify it. If this is in the vein of, or in the world of Final Fantasy 1, we know that first castle, or last castle, as it's both, is a small part of it, and you go to diverse locations outside of it.
True.
What worried me about the location is that when you go into the UI, it has the option to abandon mission. I don't know if it was from the demo, but I got the feeling that it was like Neo, where you could abandon a mission because you're going to levels on a map instead of an interconnected open world.
which
Did anybody get that impression?
Sure,
I could
yeah.
see that, and I think that's kind of fine, because when you think about like Final Fantasy games, you can always leave a dungeon, right? Like, and you usually have an item like I forget what they're called, like a rope or an escape item that lets you just leave a dungeon.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, what do you leave to? A menu for all the missions, or the overworld?
It might
Yeah,
be, might-
I mean,
it might be an
if
open
it
world,
was
might be a
something
menu.
where it brought you to, like, exiting it just took you out of the dungeon, okay, that's one thing. But I see your point. Like, maybe it was going to be like Neo was, where you actually just go on the, like, overworld map and just click on, okay, I'm going to go here and do this area.
Yeah,
or I'm going to go here and do this area.
I definitely don't think it has like connected areas like Dark Souls does, where everything's just connected to each other. I do think that it is, if there might be an overworld, but even if there is like an overworld where you can fight things in, it's going to be like when you reach a dungeon, you're like going into a dungeon, like a totally different zone, basically.
Yeah.
Well, okay, moving forward with graphics, but like, what did you guys think of like the actual graphical fidelity beyond just the imagery? And also, let's say the use of the license in, say, the enemies, like fighting bombs and goblins and stuff.
I thought it looked pretty decent. Like spells, I thought looked pretty nice. I thought the goblins looked really good.
Yeah, the enemies actually were a highlight for me.
The bombs looked awesome.
Yeah.
I think those are some of the best bombs I've seen. I thought Garland kind of looked... He kind of looked like Megabyte from Reboot. That's what he reminded me of.
But
You had an issue with Garland and not Jack?
Oh, I mean, if we want to talk about the absolute worst part of the game, sure, let's talk about those awful character models and how terrible they
You know
look.
what I don't understand? And I mean, they got a lot of flack for it with Jack's image in like what they showed at E3. But unlike a lot of games that perhaps do or don't do this, your image changes with your gear.
you just put on new armor, yeah.
So why in the trailer didn't they just show him wearing some of the like as soon as I got like the first piece of like different armor, I was like, okay, that looks better. Like immediately. So why make the base look, which is as basic as it's going to be and pretty much your unarmored look, the one that you use for the trailer?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just to show like him at his most baseline, I guess.
It could also be, I mean, not their biggest concern with what they wanted to show. I think maybe what they wanted to show with this trial maybe was more the combat system and what they plan on doing with the game as a whole.
Yeah, like, I thought the armor looked pretty good.
When you switch armor, it looks fine, yeah.
And, like, by the time I got to the cutscene, I had him wearing, like, a cowl that, like, mostly covered his face and stuff like that. It looked perfectly fine because that was actually captured in the cutscene, so I like that. So I was quite fine with it once you were able to cover him up. But yeah, like those three characters were awful. They were really, really lame main characters for a Final Fantasy game. I think maybe the worst ones I've ever seen. So generic and so boring and just talking about how they're going to kill Chaos a bunch, I guess.
Yeah, I mean the dialogue. If you want to talk about anything, the dialogue was probably the worst thing that I experienced.
That was if this is how the entire game's going to be, this is not a Final Fantasy game you're going to play for the story. That's for sure.
Going back to like the aesthetic though, like so I do agree. I like the goblins. I like the bombs.
Yep.
The wolves were fine.
Yep.
I don't think they were bad. And same with was there any other? The bats was the other enemy that I can think of.
And there was a weird like growths on the pillars.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, it seemed to me that was something more built into like the process of the game? Because you notice like when you broke one, it seemed to open up the new areas.
Yeah, it opens up a path, and from what I could tell, for most of the dungeon, you had 2 paths to go, and you could go through one, and like one of them I could remember was a room with some fire on the ground and a whole bunch of bombs, and the other one was with one of those growth things that kept spawning goblins. And I think like the growth thing with the goblins was much easier to deal with. So it gives you the opportunity to sort of pick an easier path. And it might be suggesting that later on, there may even be more branches to get to places you want and to explore too.
I did also notice they used a thing that, we're used to seeing in, the Dark Souls games, but the shortcuts. Right? Because there was a couple points where there were shortcuts. They opened a door to somewhere because it was locked, or they opened, a ladder coming down that you could go to an earlier area.
The ladder was definitely the ladder that led to
clearly exactly like it.
Bonfire at the very start.
Yeah.
Level was obviously a very Souls-like thing, opening up some shortcuts.
Well, before we get into those mechanics, then why don't you guys just close up on any other comments you have on graphics?
I thought they were okay. Definitely could have been better. There was a little bit of disjunct between the enemies and kind of the environments. I think, some of the grass effects and stuff were good, and even when they lit on fire. But, the textures on the walls were kind of boring, and even, like you said, a little bit grainy, not quite as sharp as I would have liked. Maybe some water puddles with some effects there would have been nice, or better lighting. And it was just disjunct from how good the enemy models were, right? And then that was also disjunct from how terrible the people models they designed were. So, yeah, I mean, kind of a mix.
Yeah, I mean, luckily you can cover up the people with armor. So I think that probably won't be too big of an issue. Mm-hmm. Again, I thought the enemies and the spell effects and all that kind of stuff looked really good.
Yeah.
For the most part, yeah, the biggest thing was the locale kind of looked a little boring. I didn't think it necessarily looked graphically bad. I thought it just was a ugly area.
Mm-hmm. All right, so pretty middle of the ground for graphics then?
Yeah, kind of. I do think it's better than most games, but when we compare it to Final Fantasy, I do think it's a bit lackluster.
Okay. All right, so why don't you guys get into gameplay then? So things like the combat. What did you guys think of the combat?
It felt a little... It felt kind of closer to Dark Souls in terms of some of the clunkiness between, blocking, dodging, and attacking. Because there is a little bit of delay. You can't instantly switch from one to the other. Yeah. So it's not like Bloodborne, for example, that allows you to just dodge and stuff at a very crazy speed. So it does have a little bit of that slowness. It's not quite as slow as Dark Souls, though. But it also has a very tactical aspect to it.
Yeah.
With you have your blocking, your regular blocking. You have a spell block that also allows you to steal.
It's almost like a parry.
That also, like a parry, and it also allows you to steal MP for your abilities and sometimes enemy abilities, like enemy skills.
Yeah, like the bombs would shoot fireballs at you, and if you absorbed it, then you could throw fireballs.
It's kind of like a temporary blue mage thing.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I actually liked that.
I liked it, yeah. I thought it was a really good feature.
I found the combat to feel a little bit floaty when you're actually in combos and mid-swings and things like that. And I get that they had their kind of alternative, but it really felt like it was missing something without a heavy attack. Where you just had one attack and then you had your attack that consumed MP.
Yeah, the heavy attacks are combos, and there's a whole bunch of them that you can customize to be parts of combos.
Yeah.
You can actually pick what you're going to have if you want your regular attack mixed with just once and then followed by a heavy attack, or have it twice and then followed by a different one. So I did like how customizable it was. I felt, though, that the longer you went in a combo, the less your fixation on the enemy stuck. So you'd start missing enemies if you went longer.
The other thing I found about the longer combos were things like getting interrupted by the enemy, right?
Yes.
Even just one of the earlier abilities where you can swing your big sword around, right? I found I was doing that, but it didn't have enough weight behind it, so the enemy was just like, I'm doing this combo and they'd hit me, and I see half my health bar go, and it's like, but I'm swinging my giant sword around.
And you'd get knocked down. One of the biggest differences between this and a lot of Souls-like games is that there's no stamina. Mm-hmm. So there's no limit on things like dodging, blocking, running, or like chaining attacks together.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's no tactical aspect to like keeping a certain amount of stamina so you don't get knocked down by enemy attacks. So it's
you have the break gauge, which they've used in previous games as well, where, you know, if you hit hard enough or enough times, you hit that break point and you fall down.
Yeah,
and it affected both you and the enemy, right?
Yeah.
So, which, you know, was kind of neat because it gave you the finishers, which I thought were kind of interesting. But when you got knocked down, man, did that suck.
Yes.
What did you guys think of the job class system, which was pretty unique to this one?
I actually liked this. I like the idea of just being able to kind of swap on the fly and learn different abilities. Very, very different than your normal like Souls game, though. I mean, in Souls, yes, you can swap weapons and kind of play a different style, but this actually had like a skill tree to each of the job classes.
Yeah, like you just earn job points and you can learn them. I like it. It feels very Final Fantasy because you learn, like, you go from swordsman was, I think, the first one, to warrior, which is the Final Fantasy class, or from mage to black mage, for example. So it very feels very much like what you'd expect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, it is also the added thing, like, you picked up a spear and you got another job class, and it was really nice that it would keep track of your armor sets for each class you had equipped when you switched. Although I felt armor was like the job class system coupled with the loot rate, which feels a lot more like Neo, and is randomized, right? Because I tried the same treasure chest a few times and got different things. Feels like you're going to be in menus a lot more because you're equipping like multiple jobs,
and you're trying to also like min-max a little bit too, right? You're going to look for what armor works the best for this class, right?
Like, I liked the job class system for sure, but I think I would have been better off with things like set loot and less frequent drops from enemies. Like, this treasure chest will always, like, more Dark Souls, right?
Yeah.
So that at least if I do have different jobs and I can have different loadouts for them, I'm not in the menu all the time because things are dropping so frequently.
Yeah, and it definitely felt like there was a lot of stuff that was dropping early on, so probably for a very big chunk of the early part of the game, you'll probably be doing that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Especially as you are picking up new classes and you're like upgrading all of their armor sets all the time. It also... since the armor sets don't have like a weight to them, they do have, especially if you get like a blue version, like a rare version of a piece of gear, they have like XP bonuses for certain classes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the same as like plate armor being good for a warrior. In this case, plate armor gives a XP bonus to the warrior. But like every class can use any piece of armor, so it doesn't really feel as impactful.
I noticed there were 4 sets of stats, though, right? So there was essentially like a physical attack stat, there was a physical defense stat, a magic stat, and then a magic defense stat. So I'm gonna go with the idea that, you know, there will kind of be a little bit more diversity when we get further on, where you see something with, let's say, a really high magic stat that you're gonna want to put on your mage or wizard class, right? Or Black Mage, for instance, right? Because you want to get that bigger damage out of your spells.
Yeah.
Compared to one with a high physical stat that you'd use with like the Warrior or the Dragoon. So.
Yeah. I do like how, as well as being able to like equip armor, equip abilities, learn like new abilities and equip them, you're able to have 2 classes equipped at a time.
And swap,
So you can swap on the fly, so that's pretty nice, I think.
The one thing I guess I was concerned about, and I mean, this is, again, it's just a demo, so they can change anything, but the trees seemed a little bit shallow. Like there was only 10 abilities. So
I
to say.
can't imagine that's the full amount. Like that would be way too small.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's why like it's only a tiny concern because again it's a demo. So
it's possible it might unlock later in the story. If we think back to the first Final Fantasy, which I'm not even quite sure this is a retelling of the first Final Fantasy or if it just takes place in the Final Fantasy world. But you unlocked additional jobs or the upgrades that are easier to get in this, but in the first game by reaching a certain point in the game. So it's possible that like, okay, this is the skill tree now, but you'll get to a later point, or they could have just tapered it for the demo.
It also could be possible too that there's further trees, right? Like the Lancer did go to the Dragoon, but it could have something further than that. We don't know, right?
Yeah, I think that's like the Black Mage becomes the Black Wizard in Final Fantasy 1. Because when they do like go back in time or whatever, they become like advanced versions of themselves.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there was at least one more like job upgrade on top of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Any other odds and ends you guys want to talk about?
For combat, not really, I guess. I did find the difficulty spike changed dramatically in the boss fight.
Yes, that is right.
And it was just because, like, the little enemies, they kind of fell over for the most part. With the exception of if you got surrounded. Like, that's the only time that it really became an issue, right? Like, if you were fighting one enemy, oh my god, you just murdered it, right? But if you fought, let's say, a bunch of enemies, which there was a section that it was like, there was like 6 enemies, like, oh my god.
The room with the wolves, they all just swarm
They just pile on you, right? Yeah. But like, and then going into the boss fight, where it's just kind of, well, I say 1-on-1, but it's 3-on-1, right? It just felt like the difficulty spike really kind of shot up with it, where you had to focus really heavily on like using your parries effectively and using your like buff where you got stronger, right, did more damage.
It felt like they gave you the Dark Souls like speed of dodging, blocking, and all that stuff, but they gave you the Bloodborne speed of telegraphs. Mm-hmm. Like it did not feel like there was enough time to react to things with the sort of delay you have on your end. In any case, especially for combat that generally did feel a lot more hack and slash than your standard Souls game. It almost feels a bit like an action game, like Devil May Cry or something like that. So it did kind of feel like a bit of a mismatch there, and that it's you're definitely gonna need to have, I think, much better, not necessarily much better reaction time, but you're gonna need to both be like a bit more tactical and slow down on your attacks while also being ready to be very twitchy with your block and dodge.
The big thing I found was like I couldn't do a single combo on him. Right? Yeah. It was like basically I had to parry an attack. Like that's the only way I was going to do any damage to it was parry attack. And it just felt very different than like in other games where you would be able to kind of parry, get a few attacks in because the enemy is either stunned or like your big attacks actually like disable them slightly or stagger them so that you could get a little bit of a combo in there. But it felt like he just went straight to his next attack, and it was
I haven't compared it to Neo yet, but I feel like almost like that game had an early boss that was ridiculous and relentless with speed and pretty much turned people off from it.
Again, it's a demo, right? Like, what more can we say?
I think one of the biggest things I also noticed with the like blocking was that there were enemies that had attacks that had multiple hits to them, mm-hmm. and you had to be blocking multiple times to get all the hits done. For example, Garland had a sort of like a charge attack that would hit you like 3 or 4 times, and you'd have to get off the block each time in a row, otherwise one of the hits would get through. And that was kind of unusual and like unexpected. Like it's really hard to tell from a telegraph before you've been hit by anything the first time if it's going to hit you multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, you compare it to a parry in like Dark Souls. It's like that parry is obvious. You went like this, the enemy's got that like moment where they're like open, and then you attack. Like. Anyways,
I think said for like all the negatives that we sort of piled onto it, I actually really enjoyed the combat.
It was
system.
Fun, yeah.
I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's one of the best parts about the game. It does have a lot of like small flaws, but I really like it.
All right, do you guys want to talk about? Okay. Trying to curb what I know you're going to say. Do you guys want to say anything about sound design or voice acting? You can gloss over it if you want to, but like we know the cringe part.
Yeah.
But I thought like the sound effects for attacks, spells was very well done.
Yeah,
I thought
no issue there.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Really captured everything, and I don't remember any sound in particular that like got on my nerves or was like memorable as that is an awful sound until their mouths opened and
it was just
talking.
dialogue.
I said to curb that.
Yeah, it was really just the dialogue that hurt any sound design whatsoever.
The dialogue two aspects, because not only was like the voice acting really bad, especially that one guy that was acting like a punk. I think it was like with the red hair or whatever. Like how did anybody think that this fits Final Fantasy? Like ever. And also the things they were saying were terrible. Like the actual script itself, like how many times do they say I need to kill Chaos? Yeah. Like that is awful writing.
But yeah, like you said, Sandro, the sound of hitting enemies or like when the wolf would cry and like attract more little wolves or like the bombs blowing up, it all sounded great.
Okay.
This is why most protagonists are silent protagonists in JRPGs.
Anything miscellaneous that you guys want to bring up? Controls, UI, anything at all? I will say I didn't like that the touch screen was your interact button and your loot button. That was annoying to me.
That was kind of weird, but
not like a deal breaker, but it was annoying.
Yeah, there were a couple things with the controls that at first I didn't like too much, but even by the end of the demo, I think I was completely used to everything. So I think it's a pretty common thing you actually get with a lot of the Souls games, because a lot of them have different controls. That once you start playing it for a bit, I felt very comfortable with it, so I'm actually fine with the control scheme.
The one thing I guess maybe a couple things, but one thing would be that it felt like as difficult as some of the enemy combinations were or the boss was, there was zero punishment. It was like you just went back to the point right there. Like that's all it was. Very different from like a Demon Souls, Dark Souls, or some of the other games like that where you have some kind of currency. If you don't go back and get your body, it's gone for good and you're basically starting fresh, and that's what you use to upgrade. No, you could just keep grinding against your face against the wall until you level up, basically.
Yeah, I don't think you lose any like XP or gil.
There was nothing. So I didn't feel the punishment gratifying victory was the same as the Demon Souls, Dark Souls. The other very small thing is I couldn't tell which like bonfire save point I was attached to. There was a point where I got the ladder that came down and I died randomly, and then I started at a bonfire way the heck somewhere else and had to run all the way. I had to run all the way back, and like even when I went to go like touch the bonfire close to the ladder, there was no like cue to let me know that's the one I'm attached to. It was the same color. It didn't change color when I activated it again or interacted with it. So I couldn't tell until I died again that I rezzed at the one.
I didn't notice that because I forgot.
Oh, you never died.
I forgot to test.
You forgot to die.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
No other miscellaneous?
Not that I can really think of.
All right. So why don't we get into our final question of, do you continue after the first opinion? And I guess you could also kind of throw in, did you like it?
Okay. Overall, I did like it. As much as we kind of hate on it for a couple of small things, I think overall there's a very interesting and unique take on Final Fantasy and on like the Souls-like games there. And honestly, I would play it. Yeah, when it comes out, I will be keeping my eye on it.
It definitely didn't live up to my expectations and was not as good as I was hoping it to be. But at the same time, like it was really fun to play. Like for all the like problems with like some of the graphical stuff and the voice acting and a few of the little nitpicks, it was almost a consistently enjoyable experience from start to finish. Like once you got out of the tutorial and you got used to it a little bit, I really enjoyed it, and there's like no way I'm not going to buy this when it comes out.
Okay, what about yourself?
I'm really torn. Like Alex said, it really wasn't what I was expecting, because it's kind of not a secret. I'm not as much of a fan of the Neo side of the Souls-likes games.
Mm-hmm.
And things like the loot were really annoying to me. That being said, by the end of the demo, I really was like, oh, I can't wait to see what other weapon I can get, or how much more I can, like, I think the job class system might have been the thing that grasped me the most, because I was like, okay, I want to level this one up, and then I want to switch and use it. And we didn't even mention it, but like the different weapons had different weaknesses. Like the bats were weak to the spears and lances, which is typical for like
maybe like a flying unit or something like that.
Like it's typical for Final Fantasy for a flying unit to be weak to that type of attack. So it was those little homages to Final Fantasy, but also the job class system that got me kind of hooked to it, that made me want to keep going. So in that regard, yeah, I had fun, and I will probably play this one, so therefore continue after the first opinion.
All right.
Let us know what you guys think. Until next time, live in the real world, play in a pixel one. Hey, did you like that video? If you did, be sure to let us know by clicking the like button and leaving a comment. If you want to be first in line for any new content, be sure to subscribe to our channel, and then hit up our Facebook page. The link's in the description below to see what's coming up next.